it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bumping through your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bumping through your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass.
Hey, welcome. This show is going to be sponsored this hour by the Really Charlie Podcast. How do you like that intro? Guess
that
what?
Was really fun.
I didn't press the minus sign, so my intro from my other podcast came on. This is Fentanyl Facts and Stories, and my beautiful co-host here, Paula Santos Young, is with me, and we have a fabulous guest, Erin DeLullo. Right?
DeLullo.
I am sorry. I just asked you to pronounce it for me. All right. The best thing about this podcast is our guests, right? I love our guests because they come on, they tear it up with some facts and stories about fentanyl and opioids. And Erin is the host of the Poisoning Podcast, where you can find her on X, Instagram. Let's see what else we have. We have Facebook. We also have YouTube, and she has a linking tree.
Spotify,
also.
And you have
Spotify.
Twitch.
What I'll do is I'll put all those sites in the comment section. So what you can do is actually just go in the comment section and link up with Erin, and please follow her. She's an amazing person, and I believe everything that Paula tells me, and she had told me that Erin is fabulous, wonderful, gets 5 stars all the way around, and even on Paula's bad hair day, she definitely...
I know, I'm telling you.
Erin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Charlie and Paula.
Thank you. And I crack on Paula occasionally, and but she's always, she's wonderful, she's professional, she does her thing out in the community, and as friends and as we say family, I can harass her like that because she harasses me. The one thing I like about her is she hasn't throat punched me yet, so I am so happy that she hasn't done that yet. See, I got a smile on her face. She has probably had a miserable day, and I'm the first person that made her smile today. You and, Erin and I made her smile today.
There you go.
All right. So the poisoning pot.
No, it's never miserable. It's just challenging. Those are the days, especially when you're in this world, as Erin, I'm sure can and Charlie. Because of what we do. But Erin, thank you so much for coming on. I so appreciate you taking the time, and listeners, I want everybody to know that Erin she's the creme over the creme. I mean, she is someone who is doing great work. She has her podcast on Instagram. Everyone, please follow. She's had amazing guests on. I mean, she's had Ryan Hampton on, who actually wrote a book on Fentanyl Nation, which is amazing. And I'd love to have him on one day because it's almost like he did the blueprint for what's going on in the country right now. She's had the amazing, he did. She's had amazing other guests such as celebrity chef Andrew Zimmerman. She's had Charles Fain, and I hope I say that right, from Manhattan Institute. And then you've also had Coach Scott Cochran, which again, these are just some of the amazing people she has had on. So trust me, we are peanuts to the people that she's had on. So I so appreciate you coming on to our podcast to talk to us, to talk to our audience, because we do have a wide variety of audience, and to really just talk about what you've been doing and what you're seeing in the country today. And I think at some point, I also want to talk about what's happening with ICE coming in and doing these raids, because they're saying that they're doing them because these are criminals that they're taking off the street. And these are the people that are bringing in the fentanyl and all the other product. So, let's also touch upon that after. But Erin, please, the floor is yours. I'd love for you to talk about everything you've been doing. I know you and I exchanged some emails in reference to legislation. And Erin sent me a wonderful article about a bill that's being put forth in Massachusetts. I think it already has been, by Senator John Velas, which is really interesting, Erin, because I actually know him. And
Great.
and I've been working with him on some things and trying to get him to come to an event that Achieve Greatness does. But please take the floor, because we are all want to hear about all the wonderful things you've been doing and how you got into this and why.
Sure. Maybe I'll start there. So I was raised in West Virginia. My family moved here when I was like 4. So I went through the public school system. Then I went to a small college in West Virginia called Shepherd. Graduated college and went to the big city, Washington, D.C., got married, started a family and a career. And then during COVID, we came back. Mostly because when you live in the city, you have very little space. And when you have young children, it's just not great to be cooped up.
Mm-hmm.
And all my family is here. And my husband's family isn't too far away, like an hour away. And we
Awesome.
came back and I said, what is going on here? And I don't even like to call it an epidemic, because epidemics have sort of a downward trend. We were in a crisis from opioids and fentanyl, and we still are. And that led me to working with a nonprofit called Harbor Path. And Harbor Path helps provide folks with pharmaceutical medications that they might not be able to afford them, or they just don't have access to them. So in this opioid and fentanyl crisis, we provide a range of naloxone. And for your listeners, when they think of naloxone, they probably think of Narcan, which is a brand name. So if you think of a cotton swab, the Q-tip is actually a brand name, but it's really a cotton swab, right? So everywhere from, your normal 4 milligram, which is what you would think a standard, which is standard Narcan nasal unit, all the way up to 8 milligrams. And I got involved with them, and we started working in using settlement dollars and grant monies to make sure that naloxone is getting in communities. And I will even say, where I live in West Virginia, where 1 in 8 babies are in 2023 was born addicted, we have a major problem. And so many people around me don't carry naloxone. It's not that carrying naloxone will make you want to take an opioid or a fentanyl, either purposefully or accidentally, but it's, you never know when you have the chance to help someone else.
True.
So that is how I got involved in this issue. And with working with so many policymakers, there was just so much going around this crisis that I said, you know what, I'm going to just start a Substack and a podcast. And my weekly Substack, which is The Poisoning, I put a whole array of news for the week. So there's, maybe 15, 20 news articles everywhere from how state governments are spending their money in this crisis, to where they may have found fentanyl. There's just so much going on. I thought I'd make sort of a one-stop shop for those interested in the issue.
Very, very impressive that you have done that. I looked at it, I reviewed it. A lot of facts in there that I will share actually on this podcast page, and along with a lot of myself, my private profiles and all that. Really, really, really something that everyone should look into. So get on board. I left a link inside the comment section. All you guys got to do is click it, and you can go right to Erin and put your email in there, subscribe to our newsletter. It's very, very interesting and definitely something you can share at home and actually at work. So definitely some great, great, valuable information.
Thank you.
Well, we bring Paula back. It's
She's
Yeah,
back.
no, it must be my internet because for some reason it's slow, but as long as you can hear me. So Erin, thank you for that introduction. So one of the biggest things I definitely want to ask you, Erin,
Yes.
is everyone that you've interviewed, right? And you've had
Mhm.
quite a number of folks because I've seen many of your interviews. Which one out of everyone, if you could pick three, or let's just say two, which one would you say out of everyone you've interviewed so far, which two folks really came out to you like, wow, I want to have this person like 900 other times because this is just the impression it left. And why, right? Because
Sure.
we all know about the fentanyl crisis. We always talk about it here every Monday. We have many guests that we've brought on from ex-agents in ICE and DEA and whatnot. And and they bring obviously a different culture to it. But we've had a lot of people on here from substance abuse communities. And then, of course, myself being a mom who, as you know, my story,
Yeah.
losing our son. So I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing, and I don't know if you see, so it's a two-pronged question, is who is your top two and why would you bring them back? And are you seeing, and the guests that you bring on, that
Mhm.
there seems to be the stigma is not going away, number one. There continues to be the
Yeah.
stigma. But also, number two, it seems like everyone's just kind of like, oh, fentanyl, okay, whatever, let's keep it moving.
Okay, so it's sort of not fair that you're making me pick two. It's hard. It's hard, right? Because I have had James Hampton, and what I loved about him is he's like, let's talk about what we agree on, Erin, because not everyone's going to agree on strategies in this space, right? And he's just so positive. And now after the Sackler, announcement this past week, the potential settlement, because it's not done, folks, it's not. I was like, oh, I need to have him back on. And he's just so giving and will give his time. So I loved him, but then, I Tony Mativi was one of my first ones, and Tony and I used to work together, but not in this space at all. And now he's the director of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation.
Mm.
And so he is like looking for the bad guys all the time, but he also has a heart for helping people. He was in EMS very early on in his career, and he actually had saved people with naloxone decades ago. So he knows what's cutting off a supply, but it's also demand. So he goes around and preaches and does demonstrations, and even on our podcast demonstrated using naloxone and the life-saving power of it. The last one I'll mention, Paula, I don't know if you had a chance to watch this past Sundays with because Luke Nefratos of Smart Approaches to Marijuana. I think that one would hit very close to home
Yes.
with you because
Yes.
he cares very much about drug policy, and they see how individuals and companies are trying to take these drugs and make them legal for huge profits, but not good for you, me, or society. And
Right.
I thought and we also sort of previewed or did some predictions on drug policy in the administration. So I really enjoyed that one too. And he's such a lovely gentleman. So those were a few. Those were a few that I've really enjoyed. But then I had even interviewed Philip Isle out of Rhode Island because he wrote a book on the only pill mill doctor from the early stages of the opioid crisis that is serving a life sentence. Isn't that crazy? Like only one, right?
Yeah.
Well, he just had an op-ed that I haven't had a chance to read. I'm going to read it on my plane tomorrow in the Boston Globe this weekend about making recovery free, because this is a crisis. And it's so hard to beat addiction once you start these drugs. So I'm interested in reading that. So there's just, it is a whole world. And then, okay, we have to mention Ed. Shout out to Ed Bish, who connected us. So, there's guys like Ed who just poured their heart and souls into this. And when I see that there might be a settlement, there's more hoops for it to jump through in the Sackler Purdue Pharma case. My heart just goes out to all those family members who lost someone to Oxy, and it's been this long. And when I talk about the Sacklers, I talk about the family members. I refer to the family members that were making decisions for that company. I'm sure there are plenty of family members that had nothing to do with that, right? But the family members who are on the board, who are making decisions and calling the people in Appalachia, like West Virginia, pillbillies because they knew they could just addict them to more. My heart goes out because they have had no justice, and we live in a society where we talk about rule of law. So I can only imagine the hurt that they're feeling.
Right. And I think one of the biggest things is with the Sackler family and what's happening there with Purdue. And yes, Ed, I love Ed. We've had Ed on. He's amazing and he's done so much. And, I think, we just saw an op-ed come out about the lawyers have indicated that they're going to put $500 million aside for the Sacklers when they go to court, so that they have that cushion, and you're talking about a family that really started this 20 years ago. And were they the only ones? No, because you and I know, Erin and Charlie and everyone listening, with everyone we've had on, fentanyl has been around for quite some time. It was first detected in 2002 in Connecticut by U.S. Marshals. And it wasn't really until 2-3 years ago that, and even back in 2017 and 18, the cartels were already putting implementations together to do what they're doing. So when people think about this crisis, they have to go back the whole longevity of this. And Erin, I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, but this is something that for 20 years and more than that, this has been going on. And we have not seen anything stopping it, because the cartels, they work on precursors, right? And we all know, if you know medicine and in the medical industry, if we had a scientist on, he'd sit here and say, there's over 200 precursors and they've only used 3. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there's so much more that's coming. And then we talk about, like you said, the families that even prior to myself and my husband and what we're doing, that have been doing this boots on the ground, grassroots movement, really pushing things to get done, because unfortunately we continue to be in this complacency that I continue to see even now, where, we constantly tell our legislative officials non-action is no longer an excuse, but it continues to happen.
Yeah, it's this weird cycle. It started, well, let's just remind the listeners. So it started, there's different phases, and phase 1 is when the Sacklers had Oxycontin and they fraudulently said it wasn't addictive, and these pills were just pushed throughout the country, not being they were regulated in a very lax way, and people were just taking them hand over fist, and they were addictive. And that's what created pill mill doctors. And people just wanted to make money. And then once our government figured out that these are not, a long-term medicine, you can only really take it a short-term time after like a major surgery or an accident, we had over 1 million new people addicted, and we cut them off from the oxy, which is great. We needed to limit how much oxy was being given out, but we didn't have an alternative treatment. set up for those who are addicted to those drugs. So then they went and they found heroin, illicit heroin on the street. And we actually did not have enough heroin in the country to suffice the demand at that point. And that is where fentanyl came into the illicit drug market. Fentanyl is a good medicine. Like if you've had an epidural, you've had some fentanyl. Cancer patients, the fentanyl patch, when used in a medical setting appropriately, is a good medicine. It is a bad illicit drug. And it's just been this adaptation. And I think we were talking on the phone, Paula. It was in November, New York Times, I want to say it was the weekend after Thanksgiving, had a front page piece. I was actually reading the physical paper. Cartels are trying to make their own precursors now. They are hiring chemistry students. And what I think people here in America need to understand is that, Mexico is not as wealthy of a country as we are. So their chemistry students can make more money working for a cartel than they can for a company. And so they're continuously trying to, the bad guys will always try to beat the system. But at the same time, in one of my interviews with a reporter from Reuters, they did a 5-piece series, maybe it was 4 or 5, losing count, on fentanyl. And they took $3,600 and they could purchase all the chemicals needed to make fentanyl. And they bought them from China, no problem, had them shipped to a PO box. They all arrived here on US soil because of a law called de minimis, which is an old trade law that big companies love. So, we need to think about this. We all love our same day Amazon, but this trade law says if your package is declared, I think it's under $800.
Yes. Yeah.
Customs and Border Patrol does not have to search it.
Right.
So these chemicals are so small and so powerful. They're small packages, and they can even mislabel what they are: cleaning product, dog medicine, things like that. And it's that easy. The DEA actually, in the same story, the DEA thought they were going to make their biggest drug bust on this drug in the country in Tucson. It was an older gentleman who ran a lawn care business, and he did package delivery. He was just paid. He didn't know. He didn't ask questions. A lot of his packages were for normal people. Most of them were for the cartels. All this stuff is just coming to us. But, do we want to change our ways? I don't know. Is losing a plane full of people a day worth saying maybe I don't need my fast package that quickly? Those are the really tough questions we have to ask ourselves as a society if we're going to beat this, because it's not simple. I wish I could tell you both, yep, the administration's going to shut down the southern border and it's all going to change. I wish it was that simple. We have to look at it, one, from the supply side, and I believe in a safe and secure border 100%. I just know that won't really solve all of our problems. We also have to look at the demand and how are we educating children? Are we providing people second chances with naloxone? Are we offering true recovery services? Because you can't give this stuff up cold turkey and just go back to normal life. So we have to really look at that for solutions. For instance, Congress has the Select Committee on China, and it's a bipartisan committee. Oh, I'm going to kick myself for not remembering the Democrat's name from Illinois. I can see his face, who co-chairs it with a Republican, Molinar from Michigan. And they seem to be very lockstep. Everybody on this House Select Committee lockstep in being against China and what they're doing, and they're calling out China for actually intentionally doing it. And they put out legislative recommendations in December, and it's all just punitive to China. I haven't seen from Congress offer solutions on the demand side. So I think it's important to work locally like you are, Paula, and do education, prevention, recovery that way. Keep, closer to home.
Absolutely.
I know there's a lot of
And
information.
No. That's okay. That's okay. And I think one of the biggest things is we talk about here on the podcast a lot. And what we talk about is knowledge is power, right? And this is why we have so many guests like yourself, because people need to hear this. They need to hear the understanding of it. And the committee, the CCP, Special Congressional Committee, I actually know and met them because I was invited back in May of last year to be part of one of their hearings that they had.
Oh, great.
And I was so appreciative of that. And there was a couple of parents that were there. I would say probably maybe 50 that were specially handpicked. And, and one of the things I can tell you is if you were to say to me, well, Erin, Paula, what did you get from it? Well, May's around the corner and nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that we are not appreciative of being at the table, but when you're at the table, actions speak louder than words. As we've learned before. And like you're speaking about the de minimis, yes, the de minimis loophole. I'm on a committee with that also in Washington. And they've been trying to pass a bill so that it's no longer just $800. It's less than that. It's like zero. You're coming and getting something, a package, whether from FedEx, UPS, your local mail, Amazon, whoever, it's going to be tracked and they're going to know exactly what you're getting. I mean, when we talk about all of the things that are going on today and how we can have a drone that looks at a different country and can tell you where I am in the house that I'm in, but we can't stop this. No, we can. It's just that they don't want to because of the money that's being made off of it. And that's something that, a couple of the former agents we've had on have specifically said that, the supply needs to be curtailed. But when you're making billions of dollars as they are, and like you said, the cartel, and they're starting to hire college students. Yeah, because they're making it here in America now. It's not even really coming from Mexico. I mean, yeah, it's still being stopped, but it's not as much when you have your neighbor who's now making it in a pill press, or you have someone who's, putting it and spraying it on the marijuana and then giving it to someone, or making the gummy bears or putting it in the vape pens. And this is where, when we talk about the supply, it's how are we going to stop it? Because we can't say that it's coming from the border, because it's not people from the border that are bringing it. Because Charlie and I had a former Border Patrol director on our podcast, and she specifically said, if you think it's coming from the border and it's the immigrants that are coming through the border, it's not. You guys have it here. It's the Americans.
Yeah, they're the ones. It's not illegal immigrants bringing it. I mean, not as what you would think, right? It is American citizens or people with visas bringing it over. Not what you might get by just, I don't know, looking on social media. So this is why, to me, naloxone is so important, because you have the power. You can control the situation here. You have the power to save someone's life.
Yeah.
There's a lot we cannot control that we can push. We can advocate. We can bang our fists, sometimes yell, not bang our fists on anything, but on the desk or something. But you can control something there. And, and it gives you that ability.
Right. And I think it's interesting because someone said to me the other day, well, why do you have to carry Narcan, right? Why should you
Yeah.
carry it? Or why should a school have it? And my response to them was, well, why do you have a fire extinguisher on the wall?
Right.
Why do you have the AED box on the wall? Same
Mm-hmm.
concept. It's
Or
there if you need
CPR
it.
mask is another, why are
Yeah.
CPR masks now everywhere? That's exactly right. It's just a
It's
tool, amazing tool that anyone can administer very simply and save someone. So
yeah, it's very important to have it and instead of not having it, because if something fatally does happen and you were offered it by Paula or by Erin and you said no, and then meanwhile one or two people had passed away, or um, it's very very important to have them. I truly appreciate the times that I was working and Narcan was already on the scene before I even got there, or before EMS got there, and is so preventing so many different um, deaths. And I seen that firsthand. So I just wanted to mention that.
well, so I can't remember when we spoke, Paula, but around maybe 9 days ago, I was in the West Virginia State Capitol doing some legislative meetings, and I met a gentleman. He is a former elected official, and he's now working in one of the legislators' offices. He was around 1,000 days clean when we met, is what he told me, or 1,000 days into recovery.
Mhm.
He was revived not once, but then like a day or two later, and it took 4 Narcans to bring him back.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, when I saw something on Twitter and I was just sharing it with a few people I work with. I think people want to live in this very rigid zone. Like, I'm for somebody or I'm against somebody. I'm for this party, I'm against this party, or that point of view. And I saw a lady complaining about San Francisco and that they spent $10,000, the city did, to give out naloxone to, and I hate to even say this word, junkies. And you know what? There are people with horrible addiction problems that need to get into recovery. But how is it bad that the city's spent $10,000 on something that could save anyone?
Yeah.
Anyone.
Could be
And if
someone.
your first responders are carrying it, they could be saving, there were 8 high school children that OD'd in the county next to me in Virginia last school year. Are they worth that money? Why are we putting dollar signs now on potentially? I mean, I think it's a great way of using resources. But I just think there's this whole backlash against helping anyone who may have an addiction issue.
Yeah.
And
It's the stigma.
just think that you mentioned $10,000, right? Usually $10,000 or whatever figure that is given to a community is usually the bare minimum. So could you imagine how much money they could give? Like
Right.
10, so they probably could get 50, 60,000, but they said, look, we're going to start you off with 10,000, see what happens. And so I always there's money allotted to make things happen, right? And it
Yeah.
just doesn't get there. It's only bits and pieces, as we say. Give a little bit of crumbs and see what happens. And but it's amazing that the outcry would be that dollar amount. And I always say that that's just a small amount when it comes to the government. They have so much more that they can offer us, and it just sits on the shelf most of the time. So um, just wanted to add that.
Thank you for saying that.
Great story, Erin. I appreciate those stories.
Of
Um,
course. Well, and even I think it was 2 interviews ago I did with KFF Health News, which does very good coverage on the crisis. and they were looking at all the settlement funds from lawsuits from the first wave in the opioid crisis. And I mean, sure, there's money misspent, money just spent on office furniture, money spent on like a new sign for a town hall. And this reporter highlighted like less than 1% of opioid settlement dollars were going to like moms and babies affected by this crisis, which really hit home because I've mentioned earlier that we have a very high rate of babies born with what is called neonatal abstinence syndrome. So they're born addicted and then they go through this withdrawal. But then that same week, we had a story come out, and I know if it's happening here in West Virginia, we're a small place. It's happening other places. This story came out in a publication called West Virginia Watch, and it was about violence happening in the classrooms, and that 20% of violence towards teachers in public schools were coming from kindergartners. So kindergartners violently attacking their teachers.
Wow.
And the superintendent of the school system in this report said it's because they're either raised by addictive caregivers or have suffered being born with addiction and not had the best treatment. So in these very traumatic situations, and when you think of this, the babies being born addicted, now violent, kindergartners making up most of the violence in our schools. And then that same week, the DOJ sued, so that's the Department of Justice, sued Walgreens because Walgreens is overprescribing opioids again.
Mm-hmm.
So the cycle that Paula says, it just doesn't stop. And I really think, those executives, and I believe CVS is now, DOJ's has the same case about CVS.
Yeah.
Maybe those executives need to come and sit in a kindergarten classroom in West Virginia and just see what greed is caused.
I agree.
Yeah.
Just because they can sell it and make money doesn't mean it's right for society.
Sometimes there's an old saying, out of sight, out of mind, but sometimes you have to put some things in people's minds, and maybe visiting a classroom or maybe walking down the street where you may see a community of people that are addicted. And sometimes they don't get that reality. They get a bunch of visuals in YouTube and everything, but guess what? You need to walk on the pavement or you need to sit in the classroom, because walking on the pavement, guess what? You're going to see someone kind of zoning out and looking like a zombie, or even a baby sitting by themselves crying for mommy or daddy, and give them that reality check that something needs to be done other than what you're doing. So, amazing.
Yeah.
See,
So,
and that's why I like facts and stories. I really do.
Absolutely. So, Erin, who do you want to have on your show next? Because obviously you've had such a tremendous amount of guests. And no, I'm just saying, like, if you could have more people, because I tell Charlie all the time, I need to, every week I got to level up because it's just it's the competitor in me. But again, it's also the prevention part, right? It's the education part that we continue to do weekly, like you do on your podcast. It's putting out the information to the masses for people to understand that this is not an addict problem, as they continue to say. This is a United States of America problem. Just recently, the DEA just hired a brand new acting administrator by the name of Derek Maltz. I don't know Derek personally, but I know of Derek because I've messaged him, and he has been a huge advocate for us parents, and he's been on every news outlet possible. And I actually sent him a message and I said, you know what, Derek, I'm glad that you got this position, but I hope that you will not be silenced, because the DEA refuses to talk about the fact that fentanyl is in marijuana. They just won't do it. And as we all know, they actually declassified marijuana, which was something that the old administrator was trying to not have happen, but we'll have to see where that goes now with Derek there. But I'm hoping that his voice will continue to be one where he continues to talk about really everything that's happening, and what you do, Erin, on your podcast, what we do here on Mondays, and what so many others are doing. Because if your voice gets silenced, then people are not going to be saved. And we have to continue to do what we do to save others, because we're losing a generation. And we continue to, like you said, it's not just a plane crashing, it's 22 teenagers a week. You know, it's innocent lives that are being lost. Your future doctors, lawyers, teachers, politicians, judges who are no longer here. And when you continue to hear these statistics and continue to hear that the precursors are getting even stronger and putting xylazine in it, where, as you know, Narcan does not work if it's mixed with xylazine. Well, now what? You know, because what I haven't heard, and I don't know if you have in your circles, and that's something I actually have put out to a couple of people, is what are you guys doing, or what are you coming up with to prevent the fentanyl and xylazine? Because xylazine, as we know, is a tranquilizer, so it's not a substance. So what are we doing for that? Because that continues to be the big op-ed now in every single city and state, as you and I know.
Yeah. So in my coverage of xylazine, I have actually quoted a doctor that says, you don't know the makeup and the drug, so try naloxone, because it could be a heavier dose of fentanyl than xylazine. So always try it before you dial 911, because you never know. Because again, these are illicit drugs. You don't know what's in them.
Right.
I am worried. I really enjoyed last week's my guest, Luke, who you really should connect with. You know, I am worried that our culture has just accepted all illicit drugs as no big deal, right? No big deal. And, you know, until I got into this, I was never a drug. I never even like drank until I was 30. It's just not who I am. I know a lot of people in college who are like into just smoking pot or experimenting with some things. It wasn't just who I was or what I was into. But our culture pushes it like it's no big deal. You know, TVs, movies, music, social media, and large companies and entrepreneurs know they can make money off of this. And we are seeing an increase in daily youth marijuana consumption, like daily, between 12 and 17. And it's because they think it's no big deal. Their parents have been taught just through culture. I'm not saying taught like school book taught, no big deal. We have dispensaries. It's just so easy to access, get a hold of it.
Right.
So what is this doing for us as a society? It's not helping when kids go into psychosis. You're seeing that cancer rates are rising. We just have to be very careful. And, you know, I do have some concerns with this administration. RFK Jr. talks about wanting, you know, to legalize federally and tax marijuana. He made, you know, he said that in his documentary when he was running in the primary for president. Maybe he's changed his mind, but I haven't come and seen him say that. Elon loves psychedelics. You know, there's a push to get psychedelics legal. Now, a good point was this past November in the states that had drug legalization on the ballot, they all failed. Even in your state, Paula, which had the psychedelics on the ballot. And you are in a, you know, people generally think blue states are more permissible to drug use. So to see that tells you the public may have had enough, or they're not ready. They're not wanting that in their lives right now. So, I hope President Trump and the administration thinks about those results. He may have won, but there were a lot of other issues in different states that I think he should look at when they, sorry, let me rephrase that. He should look at those results from when illicit drugs were defeated and, really think about that's
Right.
how the people want it to be right now.
Yeah, there's so
Right.
much when you start taxing stuff that there is maybe that was unlawful, and at some point, they tax alcohol, tobacco, and then they never curb the addiction, like, until it's too late, and so I just don't I really don't like taxation of anything, because then that's just it just opens it up for so many other things, that associated with addiction to, whether it's marijuana, opioids, alcohol, or any other drug. When the government ends up getting taxed, it becomes, government, they want more money, they want revenue, and they're like anybody else. And so when that money comes in, they're looking at it and say, well, let's try to do this, let's do that. And you talked about earlier about the $10,000, right? And I had mentioned about how that's a small amount, right? So imagine if they're getting millions and millions off of taxing marijuana. They're just going to look at the millions and billions of dollars that are coming their way, And
Well, they already are, Charlie, because
Yeah,
Massachusetts, just from the cannabis industry, Massachusetts, and it was actually in the Boston Globe and the Herald, I believe they quoted, I think it was $4 billion that Massachusetts received from the cannabis industry. So the states are already getting money from the cannabis industry. The problem is that, kind of like the opioid settlement funds, they're not appropriating the money correctly, because that money is supposed to be used for the schools, but yet just in Boston, they're looking at closing 7 schools. So then you have to kind of take a step back and say, okay, so then what the hell is happening to this money? And even with the opioid settlement funds, I mean, we could sit here and have a whole week of a podcast, Erin, you and I and Charlie, on the misappropriations that's been happening with these funds, because there's no accountability. No one said, okay, let's do this. This is the money you're getting, but hey, this is who's going to be accountable for it, right? This is who's going to be holding your hand to the fire. And that's not happening. You have agencies today who get federal funding for substance use, programs, and they are tapping into that money, which they're not supposed to be, and they're not legally supposed to be, and they are, because no one is saying, hey, company ABC, you're not supposed to be getting those funds. No.
Yeah, and sometimes that's based on the narrative of what they submitted to the government. And sometimes what happens is they get the right people to, like a grant writer, to write something up and add a little twist so you can get that money where, there's some kind of addiction, whether it be marijuana. So in those cases, you got to kind of use the Freedom of Information Act, and you got to go after the things and see why they're using different things and how they're using it. And a lot of money is used on salary. Yeah, staff, people have to get paid, but are you overstaffed? But I really, 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 that Freedom of Information Act is very, very crucial to people like us that are putting podcasts out, and you just submit them. They have generic forms, and you just submit it, and you're going to get a lot of information, but just want to add that, because Paula, I would love to get on that and find out where that money from all the marijuana, where it's getting allotted to, and that would be something that spikes my interest very much. So maybe I'll produce a podcast on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we're coming up to time. So, Erin, thank you so, so much for being on. We so appreciate you being here, giving us your time, doing what you do, having the amazing people you have on your podcast. Everyone, please follow Erin because she's doing amazing things. Her research is just top notch. She does what she says and she says what she does. Erin, I don't know if you'd like to leave a message to everybody out there who's hearing, just kind of your last words.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on. I hope everyone will consider carrying naloxone on them, whether it be school, work, keeping it in your bag. Like I keep at least one in my purse. And feel free to reach out to me directly at the links Charlie's provided, or you can go to harborpath.org and hit contact, and we would be happy to work with anybody in distributing naloxone and giving people a second chance to save lives.
That was Harbor Path, you said?
Harbor Path. Mm-hmm.
.org.
.org.
I believe this is right. And I'll put it on the screen. Is that correct?
There we go. Great.
All right, good job. The Erin, amazing you are. I definitely you appealed. You got my interest with all the things that you're throwing out there. Your content is beautiful, and so I'm going to continue to follow you and actually share anything that I see that's coming from you. Like when I get an email with your newsletter, I'm going to share that. There's a lot of things that I'm going to try to do to kind of add to that, because everything that you said, everything that Paula said, applies to our community here in our state, our city, all over the country, really, all over the world. And so when I share it, the 5,000, 4,000 people that I have, they get to see, and there's definitely more than enough people on there. And there's some that are listening to us right now that need these stories and need this help. And hopefully they do supply themselves with all the solutions and trying to help people that may be overdosing. So, Paula, I want to say one thing, right? I want to say I'm not going to give you any football questions today at all.
Thank God.
Me either, please.
No.
This is something we do every week. He asks me every week a football question. And of course, because I don't know sports and I suck, although I should, because Achieve Greatness is around sports and what we do. And I've had guests on here who are just like shaking their head. They're like, are you for real? Like, because I don't. But I can tell you, I am sad. I am sad that, and I know they're not called the Redskins anymore, but I am sad that Washington did not advance because they so deserved it. They really did. I mean, come on, the Eagles have been there way too many times. Let somebody else have a chance. So I'm sad about that. And Kansas, let's stop. Look, one day it's going to come out that all these things are being betted on, including the freaking refs, just like boxing. No one thought boxing was being betted on, and guess, surprise, surprise, it all started coming out.
Well, it's the sport that I love, and it's amazing that all this controversy throughout this season has been going on over referees, and they got to clean it up. It's very, very important that they clean it up, because people will fade away, people will not bet, because they think that the fix is in, But anyways, Erin, you get 5 stars.
Aw, thank you.
Paula, you always get 5 stars.
Yes.
Amazing. I appreciate everything that you do. And, everyone that's listening to us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, please, like and subscribe all the different channels. Go to Erin's, make sure you like and subscribe, share. We got to add those clicks to every one of our websites that we have. And Fentanyl Facts and Stories comes to you every Monday, 7:30 Eastern Time, and with fabulous guests like Erin. All right. I am all set. Paula, you have anything?
No, thank you everyone for being on, for listening. Again, Erin, thank you. Have a safe flight tomorrow. And Erin and I are working on something. We're not going to share what, but we are working on something. But I so appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do. And please go follow her, because again, she is giving you the facts. She's giving you great people that are coming on talking about this to educate you, because this is what it's about. It's about education. It's about prevention. It's about acting. And we know who we're losing. We know that we're losing many, many innocent lives. And we're not going to wait on our legislators to make a difference. We have to do it.
Actually, yes. All right. I can't say
you
any
both.
more. I really, really appreciate both of you, and let's keep in touch.
Great.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Thank you.
all
Good
right.
night, everyone. Thank you, Erin.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Have a great day. Great night, rather.
It's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yo, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Yeah, it's the Really Charlie Podcast. Bump into your broadcast, grab a chair, fill your glass.